This was the scene night before last. You can see Venus on the left-hand side of the screen, and you can see the monument over on the hill on the right, and the sun setting, and the apartments with the lights on, with people carrying on with their cozy existences and plotting a way through these strange and unpredictable times. And you can see some of the lights of the city glittering in the distance. And here's a view in the other direction. Just a few moments ago, a little earlier in the day, and you see the wonderful hills in the background, and this is sort of on the outskirts of town, and it's beautiful up here. Ulaanbaatar, come and visit. I was experimenting a little bit with video making, and I downloaded an app, and I was trying to broaden my skills and didn't quite work out, so that's just a still shot of me. And the last few days I've been looking into alchemy. What is the alchemical process? What are maybe some of the basic tools or the basic terminology? Just barely sort of dipping into it. And because it does relate to our subject, and I'm torn between thinking of alchemy as metaphorical for an inner journey. But then I've also found some interesting things with looking into, for instance, monatomic gold, which was something that was prized in ancient Egypt. And I did a little digging into this story of it's all over the internet, like the Anunnaki coming from some other planet, Nibiru. People talk about this, and then their offspring, these giants, the Nephilim. And I know there's probably a lot of pretty good evidence about giant-sized people all over the world. I haven't seen it, and of course I'm very skeptical. My nature is a skeptical nature. But that the people came, the Anunnaki came, these star people, and they landed. I'm just giving you the background story about monatomic gold, and that they chose the Nile Valley because they detected large amounts of monatomic gold, which is alluded to as being mana, M-A-N-N-A, or it was, what was the other word for it? Mythkuts, something like this. It means, what is it? Like, what is this substance that improves conductivity in neurons, that confers or extends life expectancy, that's been discovered by a man, a farmer in the United States. What's his name? David something. I'll let you know in the show notes. This farmer who detected this substance, he was trying to figure out how to increase his cotton crop. And he discovered this substance that was on the top of the soil. It was like a white powder, and that when it was exposed to sunlight and to heat, it would disappear. But then when the atmosphere was cooled down, it would reappear, and it had these interesting properties. And people have done things with monatomic gold putting it on a scale and seeing that you get a negative reading on the scale, as though it's kind of is anti-gravitational or levitational in some way, and that the also going back to the ancient Egyptians, the story of Moses going, he comes up, he goes to the mount, he goes up, receives the commandments, and then he comes back down and he sees that his people are worshiping this golden calf, which symbolizes the age of Aries. And Moses is very angry. He destroys it. He burns it, and it turns to dust. Well, of course, when you burn gold, it melts. It doesn't turn to dust. So what is this? In other words, some people think that the story is about this substance, monatomic gold, which is a white powder that then was mixed with water, and the people were commanded to drink it. It was also made into bread, and that it had very powerful effects on mental functioning and also on longevity. And I wondered how much of this had to do with what we're reading about in the work that's attributed to Saint Germain. And this monatomic gold that some people take regularly, it's because it's superconductive, it allows you to connect with other dimensions. And of course, I have no idea what that means. No one has yet proven to me that we live in a dimension and that there may be other dimensions. Excuse me, this seems to be, to me, an example of falling in love with the mental construct without checking to see whether it correlates with reality. The multi-dimensional universe. What is a dimension? What is this thing? Do we live in a dimension? What is this? I don't see any proof of this. But what they do say is that monatomic gold will enhance your intuitive abilities, mental functioning, clarity. It probably, if you enhance them enough, it probably feels like you're tuning into other dimensions. Perhaps it's just you're tuning into potential that you've never experienced before. So, there's also ruby red colloidal gold. All of this is just very new to me. I studied chemistry very little. The main point here is that we're looking into how we can accelerate our own personal development. And so we're looking into the figure of Saint Germain as someone who perhaps possessed certain knowledge that allowed him access to potential that if we meaning you, me, of course, we are very special people, very good people. I'm sure we all have only the best intentions, But the idea that when you feel that you're in a world that is beyond your control and that there are forces acting on you that you cannot challenge or even imagine, really, it's hard to conceptualize where these forces come from, and you feel kind of like a leaf in the wind. And you wish to feel like a free agent and an actor, instead of, in the best sense, rather than something that is acted upon. You don't want to feel like a slave. You want to feel like a master of your own destiny. And you also have a very strong feeling for the suffering around you and you wish to alleviate it and you don't know what is causing all this and you don't know what are the artificial constraints that prevent you from simply taking action, and you want to dissolve those constraints and you want to join with others, and you have a sense that this is all possible. And then you realize that there's nothing in your way, really. There's nothing in your way. So let's continue. I will try to make sense of this, but mostly we'll just continue reading through the Trinosophie, the Most Holy Trinosophia, attributed to Saint Germain, but which I very much doubt this attribution. I think probably more likely Cagliostro wrote this. And my issue with alchemy is simply that I believe that we don't need to muck around with vials and, heaters and tubes and substances and powders and acids. I think my feeling is that we have everything as what did I do? I lost. Oops. What did I do? Okay. Just my ineptitude showing up. That we should be able to produce with purely psychic energy, purely with our minds, we should be able to produce what would you call it? That longevity, that hyperconnectivity, that a heightened empathy and even greatly enhanced physical energy, that all of this can be done in the mind using the imagination. This is kind of my feeling. Now, my feelings may change, and I'm hoping that they do. This is a journey. I'm not here to defend or purport that kind of new philosophy around anything. I'm just here to produce results, and so my views will change to the extent that they need to change in order for me to help produce the results that I very much wish for and imagine, and I hope to stimulate this same kind of process in others. And so anyway, let's get into it. Section 8. We see a white lion, and alchemical, obviously looks very alchemical. Metaphorical, symbolic alchemy being represented here. Section 8. I left the gallery by a low and narrow door and entered a circular apartment, the paneling of which was made of ash and sandalwood. At the further end of the apartment, on a pedestal composed of the trunk of a vine, lay a mass of white and shining salt. And this is what I was saying. I know salt, let me just interject here. I think salt represents the body or the substance of the body in alchemy, but I'm wondering if this is not monatomic gold that is being referred to. Going on. Above was a picture showing a crowned white lion and a cluster of grapes. Both rested on a salver, sustained in the air by the smoke of a lighted brazier. To my right and left, 2 doors opened, one giving unto an arid plain. A dry and scorching wind blew over it continually. I think this is also code for some alchemical process. The other door opened on a lake, at the extreme end of which a black marble facade could be seen. I approached the altar and took into my hands some of the white and shining salt which the sages call, and I can't read that, I'm embarrassed to say. I wonder if this is monatomic gold. Perhaps someone can help me. Perhaps I will find out myself. I'm sure we'll get to everything that's of any importance in all of this, so be patient with me. And we see monatomic gold, I think, in oceans, at the bottom of oceans. We also see it on land, on arid land. So, which the sages call, and I can't read that, and rubbed my entire body with it. I impregnated myself with it. And after having read the hieroglyphics accompanying the picture, I prepared to leave this hall. My first intention was to leave by the door opening upon the plain. But there issued therefrom a hot vapor, and I preferred the opposite path. I had the freedom of choice, with the condition, however, not to leave the one once chosen. So once you continue on one path, you cannot you must stick with it. I decided to cross the lake. Its waters were somber and sleeping. At a certain distance, I clearly noticed a bridge called, and I think we will find out exactly what this bridge is called. It has something to do with the bridge over the strong, over the strength, the most strong or something. We'll get into it. We're going to get help from in a moment in interpreting this. To reach it, I would have been obliged to follow the windings of a shore covered with rocks, and I preferred to cross the lake. I entered the water, which was as thick as cement. I noticed that it was useless for me to swim, since my feet touched the bottom everywhere. I walked in the lake for 13 days. Excuse me. At last I came to the other shore. All right, that gets us to section 9. So for help in interpreting this, I went over to Simona Rich's channel. There you have a much better representation, a much clearer representation of this, the white lion, and it looks like a pine cone, which could represent the pineal gland. And there's a fire below it. And then she has the text reproduced here, the symbolic image, and she says, this is now her explanation. In the sky blazes the philosophical sun. Within it the face of the Logos. What is Logos? Let's see if we can look at this image. Logos is very hard to translate. It's Greek, and it is kind of like the underlying order or intelligence that gives rise to life, to sense, to meaning. It is an organizing intelligence that pervades the universe, or perhaps gives rise to the universe. In the Bible, where it says, In the beginning was the Word. I think the original text, the word is logos, which is something that to me comes before the word. It gives rise to the word which pronounced gives birth to yet another level of symbolic meaning, but also potential for another stage of conscious existence. So that's logos. And I'm trying to make this picture larger, but I can't. You should go to her channel. It's very, very good. And I just want to thank her for all of her work. The face of logos, which to me, in like Mongolia, we talk about Tengur, which is something, it is infinite intelligence. It's not something we can pretend to understand. It's not something that we can ever understand. And so it's impossible to say, well, God said this, Tengur said this. We can't possibly put words to what is ineffable and beyond technically by any calculation. It's not something we could ever hope to put words to. Its rays are concealed by the same clouds which must ever hide the divine light from the eyes of the profane. Of course, I don't know who the profane are. I don't know that there is such a thing as divine light. I'm just proceeding like everyone else here. I tend to, I have an aversion to terms like this. The lion is now crowned. Its coronet having 7 rays, symbolic of the 7 energies of the will. This is I don't know what the 7 energies of the will are, This is no longer the despotic lion of the earlier illustration, which I guess is sort of like, the lion who seeks only through his own power to achieve greater levels of despotism or unbridled sort of that kind of ultimate power corrupts or absolute power corrupts absolutely, this sort of thing. This is a different line. Ambition has been transmuted into aspiration. Very interesting. That kind of hunger, that unreasoned animal hunger for security and power and prestige, now it's aspirational, which is, I guess, what we were talking about, really, looking to the future always, knowing that the essence of who we are is in the future, is in what we're wishing for. It's what we're working toward. And that impulse which unregenerated lures men on to temporal destruction and is now the force which bestows courage upon a spiritual enterprise. A bunch of grapes symbolizes illumination. That's interesting, because grapes ripen in the sun, so they sort of reflect the nourishing power of the sun. They represent the fruits of labor. They represent even, to some, I've also heard that the bunch of grapes represents the blood that courses through us, the life energy that courses through us. A curious work on alchemy states that the grape has a special affinity for gold, and that when vineyards are planted in areas where gold is abundant, the roots of the vine absorb the minute particles of this precious metal and distribute them throughout its stalk, leaves, and fruit. And here we could be talking about monatomic gold. We could be talking about ormus. that was discovered. I will put it in the show notes. What to look into. There's apparently there's a film called All the Gold You Can Eat, and this is a kind of what would you call it? An interdimensional substance, or a substance that opens the door to other dimensions, that disappears and reappears. It is a nourishing substance. Apparently, it's capable of nourishing, providing energy to fruits, plants that tremendously increase their size. This could refer to that. In alchemy, gold is the symbol of the supreme principle. The Nazarene, Jesus, likened his disciples and himself to a vine with its fruits. The grape cluster is an appropriate symbol for the school of the adepts, for the initiates grow together upon a single branch. Here also is a subtle allusion to the blood, or what I just said a minute ago, which carries within it the golden particles of the sun. The lion and the grapes restate the old formula, wisdom and generation. The panels of characters on either side of the brazier contain fragments from old ritual and mystery texts. The one upon the right reads, "Kindle a light at the appointed time, the 7th hour of the dawning." And this, I don't know what that means. This is followed by an obscure reference to the coming 4th of 5 at the full sun, then noon. And the panel concludes with the admonition, "Dance in a circle and prophecy." Maybe it should be prophesy. The power of prophecy, when you prophesy, the verb to prophesy. Maybe misspelled here, I don't know. The panel at the left is also descriptive of a ceremony. Honor is paid to the giver of life. The initiate is admonished to sacrifice his ka, or soul energy, power. The number Q appears in the symbol of the ark, or the coffin in which candidates are buried in the mystery. I think also the Ark of the Covenant, which I think was the Ark of the Covenant, is like a tabernacle, a movable temple, and in which some people say there was monatomic gold, that this is the treasure, that Solomon's gold, relating to the Ark of the Covenant. I'm sure many of you know a lot more about this than I do. With the aid of Egyptian metaphysics, it is not difficult to decipher these symbols. The number, I guess it was Q, what is it? Refers to the 9 lesser mysteries associated with the box or coffin, the body. The sun face is the resurrection. The sun god, which is represented in modern times by Jesus. The whole panel describes the passage of the soul through the invisible worlds as set forth in the symbolism of the pyramid rites. This is appropriately placed in the 8th division of the manuscript, inasmuch as the 8th sign of the zodiac is Scorpio, and it was in a certain degree of this sign that the high priest released the ka of his disciple into the amenti. I'll find out what the amenti is. The alchemical salt. Here we go on. How much time? I don't want to take up too much time. Okay. The 8th section of the manuscript is devoted largely to an understanding of the mystery of the alchemical salt. And that, I think, represents the body, or it could be the alchemical salt, could be monatomic gold. I don't know. I could be way off on this. On this mystery of alchemy, Eliphas Levi writes, "To separate the subtle from the gross is to liberate the soul from the prejudices and from all vice, which is accomplished by the use of the philosophical salt." That is to say, salt of the earth, perhaps we know this expression. Wisdom of mercury, that is, personal skill and application, finally of sulfur, representing the vital energy and fire of the will. By these we are enabled to change into spiritual gold things which are of all least precious, even the refuse of the earth. Unquote. The salt of the sages is wisdom derived from experience. For experience is the salt of earthiness. or the material state, and a wise man is the salt of the earth. In our manuscript, the salt is called the first among the regenerated. When the, and I can't read that, initiate impregnates himself, however one does that, with salt, it is equivalent to saying that he makes wisdom part of himself. That is, perhaps we learn from experience. We process it in such a way that we are then propelled along a progressive course rather than simply making the same mistakes over and over again. Salt is a preservative of bodies, just as wisdom is a preservative of souls. Decay cannot affect that one who has discovered the wise man's salt. So I'm not sure. Let's see. Leaving the circular apartment. Interesting notion, interesting image, a circular apartment, beautiful. And the mass of white and shining salt, the initiate approaches the edge of a somber lake and perceives at a distance a bridge called, here's the name of the bridge, the strong to be subdued. It could be, the strong to be subdued could be personal willfulness, ambition that we have to overcome in order to tap into a higher force, a higher power. The term also signifies a reflector or shadow suspended over a lake and betokens the rainbow bridge, the bifrost of the Scandinavians, very new to me, the bridge which leads from Earth upward to Asgard, the terrestrial paradise where dwell the 12 Ases. This, I think, has to do with African mythology. Ases are spiritual forces that act upon the world in various ways. I don't know much about it. The Hierophants, that the bearers, the carriers of traditional wisdom of the world. The 8th sign of the zodiac is Scorpio, well represented by the dark and somber waters. The sign of the Scorpio was especially venerated by the Rosicrucians, which we'll get into next time. I promise you we'll get into that a little bit. Very suspicious group, in my opinion, who performed certain of their rituals only when the sun was in this constellation. With great difficulty, the initiate forces his way through the morass of Scorpio to reach the great temple of Sagittarius, which looms in front and above. All right, and then you could submit a comment. Great work, Simona Rich. We'll get through this. We'll get back on track with the history. Who was in historical verifiable terms, who was le Comte de St. All right, be well and be excellent.